For more on the story, we cross to SABC News reporter Bongani Gema, who is in Nongoma. Bongani, thank you so much for joining us on Point. Earlier on, when we spoke to Simpiwe, he told us about how busy it is there. How is it progressing right now? He did say that a lot of dignitaries, some from as far as Zambia and also Eswatini, have come up. Have you spotted anybody who has come through for this Ngena Isbayen?
Well, Diabo, it is a hive of activity, as you say. We did notice that the regiments have started trickling in. As you know, that this ceremony is big, and their participation in this ceremony is also a huge impact. We also understand that the king again did take part in a hatching ritual, as we saw last time when they were doing their cleansing. That the king went out on their hands again. This time he did go out on their hands with his regiment. We also understand there, Diabo, that the kraal entering is not going to take place tonight, as we said in that package that we played, but we understand it's going to take place tomorrow during the midday, because we understood earlier on that was going to be taking place in the night. But yesterday, Prince Buzabazi did clarify that this kraal entering will take place during the day. It brought daylight for everyone to see. So this is a very significant ceremony, as we all understand. We understand that the king is going to be introduced to his ancestors as the leader of the nation. You know, some areas they were saying that the king is going to be installed, but that has now been clarified. The king has already been enrolled. This ceremony is only to just introduce the king to his ancestors. But I have with me Ubuzecheni Mdletshe, the praise singer of the king, who understands these kinds of rituals better than I do. Baba, thank you very much for your time. Sicela nje usichazele kwababukeli bethu ukuthi lo mcimbi ozokwenziwa siyazi ukuthiwa ingonyama izongena esibayeni, siyazi ukuthiwa ke kumcimbi obalekile. Mhlawumbe ukuchaza wena ngakubaleka kangakanani esihlalweni sayo ingonyama?
Ngibingelele kubo bonke abenkosi. Usuku olukhulu lolu kuZulu wonke. Usuku olukhulu lolu esihlalweni sobukhosi bakwaZulu. Usuku olukhulu lolu nakuyo ingonyama ezothatha isihlalo. Siyazi ukuthi ikade ibekiwe, kodwa ngobuningi bezinto zobukhosi ikhani namhlanje izongena esibayeni lapho esizokwembathiswa khona amakhosi asalala, ezohlala esihlalweni sawo, yembathiswa khona izindlovukazi zobukhosi bakwaZulu ezazala amakhosi kusukela lapha esingazikhona kunamhla lapha embathiswa khona amaqhawe onke asendlunkulu alwela ubukhosi. Kulapha yembathiswa khona isizwe sonke samaZulu. Ngakho ke usuku olukhulu. Okunye okubaleke kakhulu ukuthi lolu suku lwandulelwe usuku olukhulu lwayizolo lapho iphume khona yathi iyo hlasela ibhubesi ukuze ibone ukuthi ingonyama iyobona ngoba inqoba ibhubesi impela phambi kwami, ngoba yimi ebenginayo ngiyibona impela ilishaya liphela ngaso leso sikhathi. Ngakho ke amandla ewathathe izolo athi esizweni Zulu, zizwe zonke ikhona emhlabeni, yazini ukuthi uZulu unengonyama, unesilo, uMisuzulu, sinqobile kaZwelithini, kabheka uZulu, kaphumuza uZulu, kadina uZulu, kacetshwayo, kampande, benodingana, benoshaka, bakasenza ngakhona, senza ngakhona kajama, ujama kaNdaba, uNdaba kaMageba. Uma nje ngifika lapho ngiyazi ukuthi kuqhubeka njalo uze kuyofika ekudeni, kodwa nje usuku olukhulu lolu esizweni sonke kwabaphilayo nasebedlule emhlabeni nabasaya ubakhona. Lolu suku libalekile kubo.
Ba uMdletshe, siyazi ukuthi lo suku lifika nje uhlangothi elihamba nomntwana uSimakade sibahambile kodwa bamfaka esibayeni. Mhlawumbe ungena kwayo ingonyama esibayeni esengenile umntwana uSimakade, ukhona nomehluko okhona lapho noma ushintsho lizoba khona?
Ukungena kwamntwana uSimakade esibayeni kufana nokungekho, ngoba ubukhosana bengonyama le engena esihlalweni namhlanje abuqali ngoba ingena esibayeni namhlanje. Baqala ingakazalwa mhla isilo samabandla ngonyama uZwelithini engihloniphayo, engithi umoya wayo awulale ngokuthula. umhlanje iqala ukubona intombi kwaNgwane bavumelana yayithatha yase kuthi kundunankulu wakwaZulu umntwana waphinda ngene wamemezela esizweni ukuthi ke umntana enkosi lo umntaka sobhuza kwezindu masibekela imzana emncane angayisibekela ingonyama yamaswazi angeke ingonyama ibe namandla ukuthi ingathenga umntana enkosi ilobo lo mntana enkosi ngakho isizwe kasikhipha inkomo sayikhipha inkomo umhlaba wonke zayolanda umntana enkosi isigodlo lesesikuso kwakhangela sakhiwa ngaleso sikhathi nguye umntwana waphinda ngene wacela kwicabinet yakhe wathi kayibona indawo angahlalisa kuyo umntana enkosi umntaka sobhuzo wazwayo ngaphandle kuba amakhelele sesigodlo yathi ingonyama wakhangela amankengane yasiqamba ngegama lesigodlo sengonyama uShaka ngakho nje konke okunye okwenzekayo okuphikisana nengonyama uMisuzulu yinto engekho ngoba ngeke owengonyama adlele phansi bese kuthi ozalwa yimi uyena ongadlele esitsheni.
Siyabonga.
That
is the praise singer of the king, Ubaba Ubuzetsheni Mdletshe, just telling us, as I said earlier, that this weekend ceremony is a very historic event because the king is now going to be introduced to his ancestors. Also saying that it doesn't start only today, but it also started yesterday when the king went out to hunt and he came back with the lion, which signifies his power and his reign that is now taking over the leadership of the nation. Also saying that, you know, Prince Simakade is entering off the kraal last week at the KwaZulu-Natal, or rather at the Inyokeni Palace. Doesn't make any difference. In fact, he says that the king has already been enthroned. So what Prince Simakade and his faction did does not confuse them as the nation. They know who they are following. The king, whose lobola was paid by the nations, which told the nation that the mother of the king was going to raise the king, who today we know is King Misuzulu.
Thanks so much, Bongani. Let me take this conversation further with Professor Velaphi Mkhize from the Umsamo Institute, who joins me now to understand a little better about these celebrations. Professor Mkhize, welcome to On Point. While these celebrations go ahead, the talk and what we've seen about succession battles, how do you think they impact the integrity of the ceremony that will take place tomorrow?
Thank you very much, Diego. I think Babu Mdletshe, as I respect him very well, and as a person who was very close to the late king, I think he has said it all. I think the whole ceremony is going to have a huge integrity because, first of all, the Misuzulu's mother's lobolo was paid by the nation. We all know that. And then secondly, it's not for the first time for him to be introduced into the kraal. And also finally, if we are saying that someone else was introduced into the kraal, it depends how into the kraal. I've been saying this many a times, that when you enter the kraal, you don't enter it anyhow. It is known that in our Zulu tradition or culture, you enter it from the left-hand side, and then you go to a specific place which is there in the kraal, which is called Enhlambelweni. That Enhlambelweni, it is actually the holy place where Misuzulu is going to be taken to. First of all, he started Mgonweni, and then he went out to hunt the Ibubesi, which is Umfowabo. And then after he came back with the Ibubesi, he went back to Mgonweni. As I speak now, I'm sure that he is still at Mgonweni. And then he will come out tomorrow now, where he will now go back to the kraal. Proper procedures will be followed. He will go to Enhlambelweni. He will go with the elders. Abantwana abahlukene, abantwana bovanana, I'm sure Mdletshe will be there. Babu Filimoni will be there. Nkosi Buthelezi will be leading amabutho. It's a proper procedure as we know it in our own Isintu will be followed. So there's no doubt that there won't be any integrity in this particular special event.
Professor Mkhize, I'm wondering about how these developments will likely to divide the Zulu nation, because there's a lot that's been said about what Prince Simakade is doing, and as well as King Misuzulu. Do you foresee this, that one day we will look back in history and talk about how perhaps the Zulu nation was impacted by current events?
Definitely, Diabo, they have to, because we are actually dealing with a number of issues here. The first one, okay, let me put it like this. King Misuzulu is the first king to be elected in a democratic country. His father was actually elected long before that. Now, circumstances were not the same. Today, we are faced with a number of issues. We are faced with the history. We are faced with the issue of the tradition, the lost history of the tradition, isiko nesintu. We are faced with politics itself. In politics, there are a number of people who are actually having what I call the politics of the stomach, which actually makes other people not to think objectively, but to think subjectively, where you find that others are using patronage of privileges or whatever the case may be. You might find that someone wants so and so to be a king, not because of he wants him to be a king, but for certain privileges that he will expect. We call it in Sizulu, abalandeli bebhodwe liconzayo. So in other, even if Misuzulu gets into that chair, he must be careful. In nowadays, there is a lot of people who will actually align himself with him and all themselves with him, and also a number of people. Today we deal with a lot of issues that were not there before. So all what I'm trying to say is that even if when he takes the chair, he will have to try to unite his brothers and actually say, guys, let's look back and see how do we cleanse all this noise which happened and which actually happened even before my father during the times of our own forefathers.
I know that a lot of our viewers are quite curious about this next question, about the significance of the lion. Please educate us about it.
Yes. First of all, a king is called Imbube. Now, the lion is that, remember, this function was last done in 1954. Now, automatically, it might sound new today, but as Ubaba Buzabazi has already mentioned, he had to go and hunt Ibubesi in other ways to show his powers, but not necessarily that. By going there, he was actually doing what is called, he is going there to fetch Umfowakwabo, his brother, in other words, so that you'll be able to wear the teeth of Ibubesi around his neck. And then there are certain things that I can't say here, which I know, very secretive, which are used in that particular Ibubesi, which are mixed with a number of things, in other words, to make the king to be strong and to increase his strength. It is only then, thereafter, where now Amabucho can go out and start singing, saying, Seliphumile ilanga KwaZulu. So that is the significance of that Ibubesi. That is why he is the only person who will be called Imbube, because he hunted and killed that Ibubesi, and those things that were needed from that Ibubesi were used, but only killed by only and only himself.
Professor Velaphi Mkhize, what happens now after Saturday's festivities? Does the king go ahead with his daily duties? Is there more to be expected, or this is it and now he continues with his normal duties?
I'm sure that besides that, for instance, there's a lot of celebration that will continue tomorrow. And maybe, I'm not sure, some are saying the president might actually come. Maybe might come tomorrow, or he might come maybe after the event to give the letter. But I think he has already been installed into the chair. He is already king. So he will continue with his duties, but now he will continue without any noise, without anything that will start challenging him, doubts created in the nation or in the world about what's going on amongst the Zulus and whatever and so on. To me, I am seeing a brighter future here, of which it must be managed and it must be assisted by the elders that are still there. And I'm still happy that Nkosi Buthelezi is still there, and also the other elders are still there who will help him, and also politicians and also other stakeholders in the communities, which will actually be saying, we are not only helping the king, but we are helping the nation in order to be part of the greater community and society of the world.
Professor Velaphi Mkhize from the Umsamo Institute, thank you so much for educating us and helping us to understand a little bit better about these festivities that will be happening of Ogungena, entering the kraal is what they call it. Thank you so much. Moving ahead, the death toll in the horror truck crash that killed Faith Wook Primary School pupils near Potchefstroom in the northwest yesterday has risen to 7. This comes after 2 more learners died in hospital. The incident occurred when a truck driver traveling on the N12 lost control of his vehicle and drove into pupils who were playing on the school grounds. And we'll have more news coming up after this short break.